Reading again from my novella Bomber. This is chapter 3, The Forest and the Camp. Mike has just parachuted out of a burning Lancaster. At first, Mike felt nothing, heard nothing, saw nothing, as quickly as the scene before him vanished into blackness. It was suffocatingly dark. There was no sensation, no pain, no wisp of air, not even the smell of smoke or burned flesh. But just as Mike began to question his own existence in this void, a subtle warmth enveloped his body, like a sliver of sunlight breaking through. The air gunner was convinced he was dead, and maybe, just maybe, this was the very entrance to hell, where for so long now, being homosexual as he was and being unable to repent of being who he was, he would spend eternity, having been judged by God on his great white throne, according to the RAF Padre. Not that he would later describe this as any more than a sensation, even a hypoxic confusion, but something was flaming inside him, and he concluded he must be near the sulphurous flames where God had designed him to be as an everlasting punishment for his secret sin. The sensation of being burned grew stronger, and with that Mike began to sense he was moving, falling, tumbling over and over. He had no idea of his position in space. All at once he felt a massive jerk pulling up between his outstretched legs and the tightening of the parachute harness around his chest. He looked upwards and saw the white canopy unfold like a shroud as the risers developed, and he sensed his further deceleration. The rush of wind roared in his ears as Mike descended towards the earth, his heart pounding in his chest. Looking down, he watched his right flying boot fall off and saw its flaming trail as it flared towards a canopy of trees beyond which he could make out some huts inside a fenced compound. Mike's mind raced, trying to process the sudden loss of his boot and the ominous sight below. The air, previously knocked out of his body by that last snapping jolt, seemed to refill his lungs with a rush, leaving the back of his throat raw and cold. "Thank God," he exclaimed, pulling on the parachute risers and trying to steer himself away from the thick green branches rapidly approaching below his dangling feet. Clattering up beneath him, whipping, bending, scratching deep gouges into his skin through the thick leather flying trousers and catching around his burned foot, Mike rushed into this thick green mass of what he thought were fir trees. Although, unlike the neat little Christmas tree his father always dragged home when he was a small boy, that made the whole front room smell of clean, fresh pine, these branches split and crackled beneath him, inflicting painful slaps on his body and on his exposed face, his flying helmet, as I say, having been pulled off by the airstream when he bailed out. Suddenly, as the canopy caught in these now broken and shattered tree limbs, Mike felt another sharp deceleration. This time he was left suspended only a couple of feet above the thick carpet of pine needles. The smell from his childhood came back into his nostrils, and in his mind he could see his ample bosom mother, gin and tonic in one hand, red-faced and already a little unsteady on her feet, thundering out, "O come all ye faithful," as her sister Betty thumped the old upright piano. Hanging from his parachute harness, like a limp string puppet, Mike felt that although she had her problems, she was unreadable when drunk, and he felt embarrassed around her. He wished he could sense her kindness and love right now. Instead, he hung suspended astonishingly close to the ground, smashing at his harness. He released it from his chest. One final thump on his sternum, almost winding himself. Like the petals of a flower, the release mechanism opened. The buckles fell out of their captive slocks, quickly glinting in the moonlight that illuminated the fur carpet just below where Mike hung as he wriggled out of his parachute harness, with a grunt hitting the ground. His foot burned and stabbed with intense pain as he staggered forwards to the trunk of the pine tree. He stifled a wince rising in his throat, at the same time swallowing hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Tasting bile, he fought not to be sick, fearing any sound would give him away to those who now inevitably would be coming for him, as they would have had time to track his parachute in the night sky. His eyes still adjusting to the darkness beneath the canopy, Mike heard a low but distinct moaning. An animal, he thought? A black bear caught in a pit or some snare, possibly set by somebody from the barbed wire compound that he had seen as he fell through the canopy now over his head. He cautiously reached for the survival knife strapped to his leg, his hand trembling slightly. The sound came again. This time he made out a word, not in English, but in German. The voice was weak, though the word breathed out painfully like a muffled cry for help. It came again, this time with pleading. "Hilf mir, bitte!" The three German words, soft, urgent, anguished, and above all else Mike knew this might give away his position to those he assumed were looking for him, likely with dogs and flashlights. "Hilf mir, bitte!" This time Mike responded with "Shh," adding, "If they find us, they'll find us. Put a sock in it." Mike probed the darkness with his right hand, pushing aside leaf matter, and then feeling cold, exposed human skin. The touch shocked him at first. He drew back his hand, the same hand that had released the bullets from a machine gun against the night fighter, the same hand that still longed one day to touch his lover in intimacy, love and passion. But curiosity got the better of him. Slowly, Mike reached out once again, his fingertips grazing against the cold skin. The hand grabbed him and pulled him down into the mulch as he smelled again the childhood fragrance of pine. Looking, he saw this hand was covered in scabs. Its palm felt calloused as the tiny brittle fingers interlaced with his own. "Alan," he said automatically. As the name left his lips, he didn't know why, but he didn't try to correct himself. Maybe it was something about caring, loving, helping, joining. But the name of his lover just came out, and with it a massive desire to help, to comfort, even to heal. "I've got you, mate," he said. "We'll get through this. Just stay quiet and don't move." Mike knew that this German could likely not speak English, but he trusted that the man would just do what he asked. End of of chapter 3.